Lucky Luciano, which is personally one of my favorite organized crime figures, next to actually Bugsy Siegel as well as Meyer Lansky, which we're also going to cover briefly in this episode too. So we have a lot of material to get through. So I'm going to go ahead and just jump right into it. So Lucky Luciano's real name was actually Salvatore Charles Lucania. And he was actually born November 24th, 1897 in Lacria, Friuli, Sicily. Lucky's parents' name was Antonio and Rosalia Caparelli in Lucania. Now, Lucky had 4 siblings, Bartolomeo, GSV, Filippa, and Cassetta. Now, Lucky's father worked in a sulfur mine in Sicily. It was in April 1906 that Lucky and his family actually immigrated to the United States. Now, Lucky was only 9 years old at the time. They settled in New York City, in the Lower East Side in Manhattan. Now, Lucky decided actually to drop out of school at the age of 14, which wasn't really that uncommon in that time period. Now, he decided to work a regular job delivering hats, making $7 a week. Now, keep in mind that this would be proven to be his only regular job. Now, one day, Lucky won $249 in a dice game behind an alley. So he decided that moment he was going to quit his job and begin making money on his street. So he used that $249 basically to begin his career on his street. Now, Lucky's parents, as a result of him deciding to drop out of school, actually decided to put him in a Brooklyn truant school that same year that he dropped out. Now, Lucky did start his actual first gang when he was only a teenager. Lucky was a member of the old 5 Points gang. Now, most of the teen gangs, they mainly did, like petty crime. However, even at a young age, Lucky really thought differently than everybody else that was around him. Lucky decided he was going to offer protection for the Jewish kids from the Italian and Irish gangs that were predominant in that area. Now, Lucky charged only 10 cents a week for his protection. And, that was around World War I. So it was around that time period in World War I that Lucky actually began learning the pimping trade. Now, Lucky also met Meyer Lansky as a teenager around the same time period. So Lucky was actually trying to extort money from Meyer Lansky when he saw him, and telling him that he could actually offer him protection. Now, Meyer was actually very defiant to Lucky's threats. And, this actually earned Lucky's respect. The fact that he was willing to stand up to him, Lucky was like, all right, I hear you out. So, from that moment on, they were actually lifelong partners. Literally. So, no one knows for sure how Lucky actually got the nickname Lucky. However, there is different stories that goes with it, such as the first being that he survived a severe beating as well as a throat slashing by 3 men in 1929. Now, it was because Lucky actually refused to work for another mob boss is the reason behind this. Some say it was because of his notorious gambling luck that earned him the nickname. Others say it is a simple mispronunciation of his name. So get this. From 1916 to actually 1936, Lucky was actually arrested a total of 25 times on charges that ranged from assault to illegal gambling, blackmail, robbery, and throughout this whole time, he actually managed to spend no time in prison. And again, this is another rumor behind his nickname. No one knows for sure how he got his nickname. Or no one knows for sure why he changed it to Luciano from Lucania. Again, people said it was because newspapers kept mispronouncing his name. So it was around January 17th, 1920, that the 18th Amendment of the United States Constitution actually took effect. Prohibition period lasted until the repeal in around 1933. So no one was actually allowed to manufacture, sell, or transport alcohol during that time period. Now, this created a massive black market void and, to basically feed the public's demands, and they were vast. So by 1920, Lucky actually met many of his future mafia leaders through the 5 Points gang that he was actually part of, including Vito Genovese, Frank Castello. And it was around that same year Lucky was actually recruited by Joe Mazzaria. Now, as actually one of his hired gunmen. Now, Lucky and his close associates actually also began working for Arnold the Brain Rothstein around the same time period. Now, Arnold Rothstein was the man that actually liked to think. Now, he taught Lucky how to bootleg alcohol as a business rather than just kind of like a loose side hustle. Now, Lucky, Castello, Genovese started their own bootlegging business with financing that they got from Rothstein. Now, Rothstein taught Lucky much of what he actually knew. Rothstein, including how to move, in high-class society. So in 1923, Lucky was actually caught selling heroin to an undercover agent. And although he did not serve any jail time, he did, suffer really severe damage to his high-class, like his image to his high-class associates, as well as his customers that he made through the high-class associates. So he basically lost a lot of them as a result of that, because no one wanted to be seen talking to him. So this actually resulted in Lucky deciding to buy 200 VIP seats for the Jack Dempsey Lewis Firpo boxing match. Now, he actually distributed them among politicians as well as high-ranking mob bosses around different neighborhoods. Now, Rothstein actually took Lucky on a shopping trip shortly before that fight to buy him expensive clothes for the fight. Now, their strategy actually worked, and Lucky's reputation was actually saved as a result of that. It was one of those boxing matches where, everybody was going to be there. So Lucky was actually earning roughly around $12 million a year and made personal income of around about, $4 million. So, and he mainly got this from legal gambling and bootlegging. Now, by 1925, Lucky soon became one of the top players in the Mafia criminal organization. Now, Rothstein was intelligent, and Mazzaria was uneducated, and he had very poor actual manner skills. Now, very limited manageable skills. Now, by the late 1920s, Mazzaria's main rival became Salvatore Maranzano. Now, he came from Sicily directly to run the Castellammarese clan. Now, it actually escalated into a very bloody war. And you have to understand that Mazzaria and Maranzano, they were part of the original mobsters that immigrated from Sicily. And this actually meant that they started their careers in Sicily directly. And they went by very old school Sicilian rules. Now, they believed in honor, tradition, respect, and dignity. They also refused to work with non-Italians. And they really actually disliked working with anybody that was non-Sicilian, actually. So if they could, they would avoid it. So, really, some only worked with people from their own village in Sicily, is fact. That's how traditional that they could get. Now, Lucky, however, he still thought differently, and he was willing to work with not only Italians, but also Jewish and Irish gangsters. As long as there was a profit to be made, Lucky really did not care too much about anything else. Now, Lucky was actually shocked to hear traditional bosses get upset at him for working with Paul Castello. Sorry about that. They called him a dirty Calabrian. Lucky actually began establishing ties to younger mobsters who were born in Italy, but began their criminal careers in the United States. He actually felt that was very important for what Lucky's plan was, and we're going to discover that here in a minute. So they were actually known as Young Turks by the older crowd. As the war actually continued, the group came to include Castello, Genovese, Albert Anastasia, and Joe Adonis. Now, Joe Bonanno and Carlos Gambino, Joe Perfassi, and Tommy Gagliano, and Tommy Lucchese. Now, the Young Turks believed that their older bosses kept them from their greed. Well, let me back up. The younger gangs actually felt that the older bosses, they were actually keeping them poor and feeding their greedy habits, meaning that they were working for hardly nothing. Meanwhile, the bosses were getting fat and wealthy, and they were getting jacked basically for it. So while they watched the Irish and Jewish gangs get rich by their elders, so Lucky's vision was an actual national criminal syndicate of Italian, Jewish, and Irish gangsters, and they could actually pull together and create a lucrative business for everyone in their neighborhoods. Now, he named this the Commission, and it was founded in Atlantic City by Lucky Luciano, Johnny Torreno, and Castello. May 1929, October of 1929, Lucky was actually forced at gunpoint into a limousine by 3 different men, and he was beaten, stabbed, and strung up by his hands from a beam in a warehouse that was located in Staten Island, New York. Now, he survived, however, and he was actually left with a, pretty gnarly scar and a droopy eye as a result. Whenever you look images out of him, you'll see that droopy eye. And that was from this actual event that we were just talking about. Now, no one actually knows for sure who attacked him. However, in 1953, Lucky told a reporter that the police were the ones who were responsible for it. And they did this in an attempt to find Jack Lake's diamond. Some say Maranzano actually ordered the attack himself. And early in 1931, Lucky had enough of Mazzarella's business. And, the war proved to really go very badly for Mazzarella. And Lucky saw this as a chance to switch allegiances real quick. So, he actually arranged a secret deal with Maranzano, and he agreed to engineer Mazzarella's death, resulting in the return of Mazzarella's rackets and becoming Maranzano's second in command as a result. Now, Joe Adonis decided to join Mazzarella's faction. Once Mazzarella heard of Lucky's betrayal, he approached Adonis and asked him, "Hey, can you kill Lucky? I need you to kill Lucky Luciano." However, he warned Lucky about the plot. His loyalty stayed to Lucky Luciano. So, April 15th, 1931, Mazzarella was killed while eating at a Coney Island restaurant in Brooklyn that was called Nueva Villa Tamaria. Now, while they were playing cards, Lucky Luciano reportedly got up and excused himself to go to the restroom. And the gunmen were reported to be none other than Anastasia, Genovese, Adonis, and Benjamin Bugsy Siegel, and Sirio, the Artichoke King, Terrano. And, he actually drove the getaway car. Legend says Sirio was actually too scared to drive, and Benjamin Bugsy Siegel threw him out of the driver's seat and drove the getaway car instead. And he also became Maranzano's lieutenant, for which ended the Castellammarese War. With Mazzarella gone, Maranzano reorganized the Italian-American gangs in New York City into 5 separate families, headed by Lucky Luciano, Perfassi Gagliano, Vincent Magano, and himself. Now, Maranzano declared himself the boss of all bosses, the capo di tutti capi, or boss of all bosses. Now, he also whittled down the rival family's rackets in favor of his own rackets. Although Maranzano was more forward-thinking than Masseria was, Lucky still believed he was even more greedier than he was, and hidebound than Masseria was. So, by September of 1931, Maranzano realized Lucky Luciano was a threat, so he hired Vincent Mad Dog Call, who was an Irish gangster, to kill him. Now, Lucchese gave Lucky Luciano a warning that he was marked for death. So September 10th, Maranzano ordered Lucky Luciano, Genovese, and Castello to come to his Manhattan office, located at 230 Park Avenue. Lucky was convinced that if he went, he was going to get killed somehow. So he decided to strike first. And he sent 4 Jewish gangsters to Maranzano's people, disguised as government federal agents. 2 of them actually disarmed his bodyguards, and the other 2, aided by Lucchese, who was there to point Maranzano out to the gunmen, then stabbed him multiple times before shooting him multiple times. It was the first assassination of many to come, to be known as the Night of the Sicilian Vespers. Now, September 13th, the corpse of 2 other Maranzano allies, Samuel Monaco and Louis Russo, was retrieved from the Newark Bay in New Jersey. So Joseph Saraguzzi, the leader of the Pittsburgh crime family, was shot to death. Joe Arizoni, head of the Los Angeles department, actually would his disappearance would actually mark the Lucky Luciano's efforts in wiping out the old Sicilian bosses. Once the death of Maranzano happened, Lucky became the dominant crime boss in the United States of America, and he set policies and directed activities. His own family, gambling, extortion, bookmaking, loan sharking, drug trafficking. Lucky became the leader of labor union activities as well, and he also controlled Manhattan's waterfront, as well as the garbage hauling all across New York, as well as construction and garment district and trucking routes as well. Lucky abolished the boss of all bosses title because he actually believed that it created trouble between all of the families, and that would make himself a target for another challenger that wanted that title. So he said enough of it. He's tired of it, so he abolished it. Instead, Lucky made himself head commissioner, and maintained control through the commission that he formed by making unofficial alliances with other bosses in other areas. Now, he kept the tradition of the Sicilian ceremony of the made man in the crime family, stating that it's a Sicilian tradition that cannot be broken. Lucky Luciano taught and maintained in Omerta the oath of silence to protect the families both from rivals and from prosecution. He also kept the structure of having 5 families within New York City. Now, once his family, the Luciano crime family, was formed, he elevated his mass trusted people to higher positions within the stature of the commission. Genovese became the underboss, and Castello became the advisor. Adonis and Michael Trigger Mike Coppola, Anthony Strolla, and William Moratti, and Anthony Carfong were all promoted to captains, or capos. Meyer Lansky and Benjamin Bugsy Siegel were actually non-Italians, so they could not be made official members. However, Meyer Lansky was Lucky Luciano's most trusted advisor, and Bugsy Siegel was his most trusted associate. It was said that any decision that Lucky Luciano made, Meyer Lansky was somewhere in his ear in the process of making that decision. So, 1931, Lucky actually decided to call a meeting in Chicago with various other bosses. And he brought up the commission officially to serve as the governing body for all organized crime families, to settle disputes and decide which families controlled which territories. And it is considered that it was actually considered to be Lucky Luciano's greatest accomplishment of his life. He was the man that organized crime. He put organized in the word organized crime, basically. So it was originally the five New York crime families, the Buffalo crime family, and the Chicago outfit, and later the Philadelphia and Detroit families were added. Now, smaller families were to be represented by a commissioned family, meaning if they were there was somebody speaking up for them. They were like the little homies. You know what I'm saying? So it provided representation for Jewish gangsters as well. Lucky Luciano made that a fact. So 1935, the first test actually came. They ordered Dutch Schultz to drop his plans to murder Thomas E. Dewey. Lucky Luciano stated it would be a cause for a massive law enforcement crackdown on everybody, and it would disrupt all of our businesses. So Schultz left the meeting extremely angry and aggravated, and he continued to press the matter to other people outside of the meeting. So on October 23rd, 1935, Dutch Schultz was shot in a tavern in Newark, New Jersey. So during the early, 1930s, Lucky Luciano's family started taking over most of the smaller scale prostitution operations in New York City and unifying them. So it was Eunice Carter, who was the assistant DA, who made the connection between Lucky Luciano and the prostitution network of New York City. So what was Carter doing? He was actually working a racketeering and prostitution network that actually ran from New York City to New Jersey. He decided he did get evidence from hookers and wiretaps. So February 2nd, 1936, Dewey authorized Carter to raid 200 brothels in Manhattan and Brooklyn, New York, to prevent tip-offs of gang leaders and police corruption from upcoming raids. Eunice actually assigned 160 officers outside of the Vice Squad to conduct raids. Officers were instructed to wait at different store corners until the orders were only minutes away from starting. During that first raid, 10 men and 100 hookers were actually arrested. However, he changed it up again, and normally arrestees, could actually be released after being arrested. Only this time, they were kept and taken to court directly. So where the judge can actually set bail amounts that were 10,000 times higher than what was their ability to pay, making sure that they would not be released. So he actually managed to build up a lot of trust with the hookers and the madams. Almost all said that they were beaten and raped by different Mafia members, and actually managed to get many of them to testify, stating that they would not have to serve any jail time. And it was really around mid-March that the defendants actually began implicating Lucky Luciano directly. 3 of the hookers stated that Lucky Luciano was the pimp in control, meaning the leader of all the prostitution ring. So he was buying. He would show up mainly to collect the money. They said that David Battello was in charge of the hookers. However, any money that was made went directly to Lucky Luciano. It was March of 1936 that Lucky Luciano was tipped off that he was about to be arrested. So he went on a run, and he went to Hot Springs, Arkansas, which it just so happened to be that New York detective happened to be in Hot Springs, Arkansas on a completely different assignment. Now, he happened to spot Lucky Luciano, and he called Dewey directly. Lucky Luciano had been on a run for roughly around 2 years at that point. By April 3rd, Lucky Luciano was arrested in Hot Springs, Arkansas on a warrant from New York. So the very next day in New York, Dewey indicated that Lucky Luciano and 60 of his men on compulsory prostitution. April 6th, some So Lucky's Luciano's attorney actually began fighting against the extradition in New York. On April 6th, some person actually offered $50,000 in efforts to bribe the Arkansas Attorney General, Carl Bailey, to not hand over Lucky Luciano's case. However, he refused it and reported it basically, within minutes, they said. It was around April 17th that Lucky Luciano's legal options in Arkansas completely wore out, and they handed him over to New York City New York PD detectives for transport to New York City for trial. So this next part is actually pretty interesting. So when the train actually reached St. Louis, Missouri, Lucky Luciano detectives had to change trains. They were actually guarded by 20 local police officers to prevent a mob rescue. They arrived April 18th, and Lucky Luciano was sent to jail without bail. By May 13th, 1936, Lucky Luciano's trial for the pandering case actually began. Dewey prosecuted the case. However, it was Carter who built the case up against Lucky Luciano. He accused Lucky of being the ringleader of the prostitution ring and called the combination. Dewey exposed Lucky Luciano for lying on the witness stand by quizzing him and showing phone records to him and taped phone conversations. Lucky Luciano also had no reasonable explanation for why his federal income taxes actually claimed that he only made $22,000 a year and stated that he clearly was a very wealthy man. And Dewey brought up Lucky's long arrest record as well as his close association with known gangsters such as Mazzarello, Cerro Tarnavia, Lepe Bolcher. So it was around June 7th, Lucky Luciano was convicted of 62 counts of compulsory prostitution. So June 18th, he actually would be sentenced to 30 to 50 years in state prison, along with Betello and other members of his faction. Many people question if Lucky Luciano was actually directly involved with the prostitution ring. Basically, profit, they say for sure, definitely. Being involved, no. It basically, it would mean a boss of, Lucky Luciano's stature normally would not be, hands-on with direct operations of the prostitution ring. It would be out of character for somebody of his stature to do that. But the evidence Dewey used was shockingly thin, and most say that Lucky Luciano did not even take the stand. And if he could have, the case probably would have been dropped. Plus, at least two of Lucky Luciano's business associates denied Lucky Luciano was ever part of the combination. And Polly Andler, who was a high society madam, said if Lucky Luciano was involved with the combination, she would have known it. Bonanno, the last surviving business associate of Lucky Luciano that was actually free, stated that Lucky Luciano was never involved in prostitution directly. Both people said soldiers would actually use Lucky Luciano's name to intimidate brothel keepers into paying for their protection. They said that Dewey built his case on Lucky Luciano's name, not Lucky Luciano's activities. Now, keep in mind, though, that key witnesses also stated that Lucky Luciano was directly involved with the prostitution ring called the combination, and said that he would actually frequently discuss the sex industry business, stating that and described it as a basic A and B stores for a large syndicate to be ran similar as chain stores, and if a brothel fell behind payment on their kickbacks, Lucky Luciano would order a crack, basically saying crack the joint up. And one person said that Lucky Luciano was working out of the Wolof Astoria office suite that he had. He had actually personally hired him to collect from the brothels as well as from bookers. So naturally, while Lucky Luciano was locked up, he did continue to run his criminal family from prison. Now, he actually used the acting boss Genovese to relay his messages, however. Now, 1937, Genovese went on a run to Naples to try to avoid an upcoming murder indictment in New York City. Now, naturally, again appointed Castello as a new acting boss to oversee all of the business interests. Luciano was first locked up in Sing Sing Correctional Facility located in Ossining, New York. 1936, authorities actually relocated him to the Clinton Correctional Facility in Castellammarese, stating that it was remote and farther away from New York City. So at Clinton, Botello would actually make special dishes for Lucky Luciano. In a special kitchen, authorities set aside for Lucky Luciano himself. Lucky would end up working in the laundry room. So check this out. Lucky used his influence and his connections to get material to build a prison church. And it is the only freestanding church in the New York prison system that also has church doors that are original doors from the Victoria, the actual SIP from the Ferdinand Magellan. So Lucky's legal appeals would continue until October 10th of 1938. And that is when the U.S. Supreme Court flat out refused to review his case, said we ain't doing it. So it was at that point that he decided to step down. Now, and Frank Costello formally actually replaced him. So also during World War II, Lucky Luciano actually managed to land a secret deal with the United States government. Reason being, in 1942, the Office of Naval Intelligence was concerned about the Italian and German secret agents were coming into the U.S. through the New York Harbor waterfront. And they were very concerned about sabotage of the facilities. So they knew that Lucky Luciano actually controlled the whole waterfront. So they made a deal with Lucky Luciano. First step was Lucky was to be transferred to the Great Meadowview Correctional in Comstock, New York, which was actually much closer to New York City. The Navy and the state of New York also lessened Lucky Luciano's sentence. So Anastasia actually promised Lucky Luciano no dockwork strikes would occur during the wartime efforts. So Lucky Luciano helped the United States prepare to invade Sicily in 1943 through his Mafia contacts in Sicily. It became known as Operation Underworld. So most legal historians debate how much Lucky Luciano actually helped in those wartime efforts. In 1947, the Navy actually determined Operation Underworld discounted any value of Lucky Luciano's wartime efforts aid. However, in 1954, Governor Dewey actually stated Lucky provided many valuable services to the naval intelligence. Lucky Luciano reportedly said that the sinking of the SS Normandy in the New York harbor, even stranger, it was directed by Anthony Anastasio, which was Anastasia's brother. However, official United States naval investigation found no evidence of sabotage at his sinkings whatsoever. So January 3rd, 1946, Dewey reluctantly commuted Lucky Luciano's pandering sentence and actually deported him to Italy. So Lucky Luciano was reluctant, but agreed, but also stated that he was still a United States citizen. February 2nd of 1946, two federal agents transported Lucky Luciano from Sing Sing to Ellis Island for deportation proceedings. Now, it was in February. Sorry, I was just checking the date. Yeah, it was February 9th that Lucky Luciano decided to have a spaghetti dinner. And he had that spaghetti dinner and shared it with Anastasia and 5 other actual guests that were there. February 10th, Lucky Luciano's ship sailed from the Brooklyn harbor to Italy. February 28th, 17-day trip. Lucky Luciano's ship arrived in Naples. So there, Lucky Luciano told reporters that he would most likely decide to live in Sicily. October of 1946, Lucky Luciano secretly went to Havana, Cuba. He arrived there October 29th, and he was driven to Havana, where he would get a place to basically stay while he was there. He wanted a way to be closer to the United States so that he could regain control over the American Mafia activities. And somehow, eventually, hopefully, he was hoping to move home. Now, Meyer Lansky already had been established in Havana, Cuba, and he was a major investor in Cuban gambling and their hotel projects that were ongoing. It was in 1946 that Meyer Lansky called for a secret meeting with all the heads of the Mafia crime families in Havana, Cuba in December. It was named the Havana Conference. So, they told their loved ones back home that it was just a business meeting and that it was also to see Frank Sinatra sing. The real reason was actually to discuss all the business with Lucky Luciano in attendance. 3 main topics were actually discussed during that meeting, which was the heroin trade, the Cuban gambling, and what to do about Benjamin Bugsy Siegel and the sinking of the Flamingo Hotel project that was ongoing in Las Vegas. The conference lasted, roughly a week. And December 20th, Lucky called for a private meeting with Genovese in Lucky's hotel room. That year, earlier, Genovese actually returned to New York to face trial for his 1934 murder charge. June of 1946, charges were dismissed. And unlike Costello, Lucky Luciano never really trusted Genovese. So during that meeting, though, Genovese tried to convince Lucky Luciano to take back the title and become the boss of all bosses and let Genovese run everything else. So Lucky Luciano calmly rejected the offer. However, he stated the following: I abolish the boss of all bosses. It will never come back. I turned it down in front of everyone. Don't you remember this? And if I ever change my mind, it will not be your decision nor no one else's decision. But it won't be up to you at all, Genovese, he said. Right now, he said, Genovese works for me, and I am not in the mood to retire, Lucky Luciano stated. If I am to hear you say this again, he said, I will lose my temper. Soon after the conference started, the United States government learned that Lucky Luciano was in Cuba. He was seen there hanging out with Frank Sinatra and other celebrities, as well as going out to all the most popular nightclubs. So he did not really keep a secret that he was there whatsoever. And this resulted in the United States government started to put pressure on the Cuban government to expel Lucky Luciano. So, February 21st, 1947, Harry J. Ansler, at the time, United States Navy Commissioner, yes, the same one that actually criminalized cannabis. He told Cuba that they would actually block all prescription medication until Lucky Luciano was expelled. Only 2 days later, the Cuban government arrested Lucky Luciano and deported him within only 48 hours. They placed Lucky Luciano on a Turkish freighter that happened to be sailing to Geneva. So after Lucky's secret trip to Havana, he actually spent the rest of his life under police surveillance. As soon as he arrived in Geneva on April 11th, 1947, the Italian police arrested him and this time actually sent him to jail in Palermo. May 11th, Palermo Commission actually released Lucky Luciano and told him to stay out of trouble. July of 1949, authorities in Rome actually arrested Lucky Luciano on suspicion of shipping narcotics to New York City. July 15th, only a week in jail, Lucky Luciano was released without charges. They actually banned Lucky Luciano from ever coming to Rome again. June 9th, Naples police actually arrested Lucky Luciano and questioned him about bringing $57,000 and a new American car into Italy's harbor. 20 hours later, they released him without charges. 1952, the Italian government revoked Lucky's passport after pressure from the United States and the Canadian governments. November 1st, 1954, the Italian Judicial Commission in Naples put very strict limitations to Lucky Luciano's lifestyle, meaning what he can do, when he can leave his house, and what he can do. And this lasted for a total of 2 years. So Lucky was actually required to report to police every single Sunday, and he had to stay home every single night. He was not allowed to leave the city of Naples without police permission. The commission said that Lucky's involvement in the narcotics trade, it basically made their reasons justified. Back in the United States, though, Genovese felt that he could actually make a move against Lucky Luciano and Castello, and had help from Carlos Gambino. May 2nd, 1957, Vincent Chin Genovese managed to ambush Castello in the Central Park apartment lobby, the Majestic. He yelled at Frank Castello and then turned to Vincent. When Frank turned to Vincent, Vincent shot him in the head. And he left quickly, actually thinking that he had killed him. However, the bullet actually just grazed Castello's head, and although he was not seriously injured at all. Now, although Castello flat out refused to press charges, Vincent was arrested for attempted manslaughter. And he was acquitted at trial, however, and was actually thanking Castello in court, after the verdict was read. Castello decided to retire after that and leave Genovese in complete control, which actually formed the Genovese crime family. Lucky Luciano was completely powerless to stop it. October 25th, 1957, Genovese and Gambino arranged for the murder of Anastasia, another Lucky Luciano's allies. The very next month, Genovese called for a meeting to approve of his Luciano family takeover and establish him as the boss of all bosses. Instead, the famous Appalachian meeting went south. Police actually raided it, resulting in 65 high-ranking mobster leaders, leading to numerous grand jury summons, and the angry leaders blamed Genovese for this disaster. Lucky Luciano was rumored to have attended a big meeting in Palermo to discuss the heroin trade and to be added to the French connection. Now, after that meeting, Lucky helped pay part of $100,000 to a Puerto Rican drug dealer to falsely implicate Genovese in a large drug deal. Later, April 4th, 1959, Genovese was actually convicted of conspiring to violate federal drug laws. So he was actually sent to prison for a total of 15 years, and he died in prison. Now, in 1969, Gambino became the most powerful mobster. Now, Lucky Luciano actually died of a heart attack January 26, 1962, at Naples International Airport. Now, he went there to actually meet with Martin Gosh, an American film producer, to discuss making a movie about his life to be titled Lucky Luciano. Now, to avoid upsetting other Mafia members, people say that he always refused film offers before. However, all that changed after his wife, Lisanani's death, which was considered to be his love of his life. So after that meeting, Lucky Luciano was actually stricken with a heart attack. Now, he was actually unaware that Italian drug official agents had followed him there, and they were planning on arresting him on drug smuggling charges 3 days later. 300 people actually attended the funeral service for Lucky Luciano in Naples. Now, his family actually managed to get permission from the United States government to get his body and bring it to the United States for burial. Now, Lucky is buried at St. John's Cemetery in Middle Village in Queens, New York. Over 2,000 mourners attended his funeral. 1998 Time magazine placed Lucky Luciano among the 20 most influential builders and titans of the 20th century. Now, Lizzani was Lucky's last love, and they had no children. Lizzani died of breast cancer in 1959. Real quick, the reason why Luciano never had children is he stated, "I didn't want no son of mine to go through life as a son of Luciano, the gangster." That's one thing he said I still hate Dewey for making me a gangster in the eyes of the world. So like I said, this episode was going to be mainly just research material. I will state a couple things real quick. If you see me looking down, it's because I'm running out of time on one of my other devices that I'm recording on. I'm using 2 different devices. So we're just going to try to wind this down real quick while this is counting down. Anyways, one of the things I like most about Lucky Luciano is the fact that he only saw green. Lucky Luciano was a man that did not care about your race, your religion, what neighborhood you came from. He did not care. All that he cared about was, can I trust you? And if Lucky Luciano felt that he could trust you, he would do business with you. And it is said that once you do business with Lucky Luciano, unless you cross him, it is a lifelong partnership. That's just the kind of guy he was. Lucky Luciano is known as one of the geniuses of the criminal underworld. In a time period in America where there was a lot of racism going on from Italians against other people, amongst even Sicilians against Italians and Italians against Sicilians and them against the Irish and everybody against the Scottish population and all that, living in poor slums. Lucky Luciano saw past that and said, you know what? I'm going to break these stereotypes and I'm going to open up the gates. I'm going to do business with Jewish people. I'm going to do business with Irish people. I'm going to do business with non-Italians. Because you know what? They're loyal, they're honest, and they can make money. And that's the only thing I care about is profit. And not just that, he went one step farther and actually made a whole system to where there's a president, a commissioner, vice commissioner, a whole ranking system. And this included other families from other states underneath that umbrella, which included the people that they were representing. So he actually organized everything. And that's the reason why Lucky Luciano will always be one of my favorite people in history. So once again, this has been Mike for Working Class Thoughts. And I hope everybody learned something about Lucky Luciano. I hope that you guys enjoy the extra features. Stay tuned. Shortly after I get done talking this particular thing, I set a bunch of information up to music, and this is a lot of good rare pictures in this, and just pictures in general of Lucky Luciano, his associates, and other things. Stay tuned after this episode. I will be uploading a part 2 with special features, including the original Lucky Luciano movie that was supposed to be made, that you heard me talking about, as well as my personal favorite mob movie that was ever made. Sorry to say it. I know everybody's thinking I'm going to say Godfather. You would be wrong. My favorite mob movie that was ever made is Bugsy. Warren Beatty starred in that. And I'm actually going to include that in part 2, along with a couple documentaries and other thing like I always do. So if you're one of my audio listeners, remember, go to Working Class Thoughts. It's no longer Working Class Thoughts online library. It's just Working Class Thoughts.